Boy, it was a thrilling day with a lot of action, a lot of emotions, a lot of drama, and remarkably, we had this game between Jan Krzysztof Duda and Daniel Dubov, one of the craziest chess games I have witnessed in quite a while. So the Polish guy is playing with white, and he goes for 1d4, fairly solid approach. Dubov goes for knight of 6, c4, e6, knight f3, d5, knight c3. Here Dubov plays the move c6, and we have now. This is there are two ways we can reach this position. This is called the semi-Slav. Perhaps the more common way is to play via the Slav move order with d4, d5, c4, c6. But the reason why a lot of people avoid it today is that they are afraid of this move, which has become increasingly popular, and it has actually become also quite unpleasant for black. So because of this reason, a lot of people, they choose to play this approach instead, which avoids this exchange variation, and perhaps the best choice if you want to play the semi-Slav. I can also quickly mention that the brilliant Sam Shanklin has made a video course on this on Chessable, so you should certainly feel free to check that out. Anyway, Dubov goes for the old classical main line, e3. Perhaps slightly more critical is bishop g5, where especially the moves d takes c4 and h6 are very sharp. Here, if white goes for bishop h4, g5, bishop g3, d takes c4, e4, b5 is a pretty sharp and old-fashioned line with a lot of theory, and the same goes for d takes c4. I'm not gonna delve more into the details, but it's a quick mention here. Knight bd7 is the main move, and here comes bishop d3. Perhaps it's not as common as it used to be. Most people have now played queen c2, which is a more solid move. Played a lot. The bishop d3 is certainly a dangerous option. D takes c4 is the response, because now white loses a tempo. So you do not want to take on c4 here, because then the bishop develops for free. So that's why you wait until the bishop has developed. Takes on c4, bishop takes c4, b5, bishop d3. And here Dubov plays bishop e7, which is very interesting. I believe that is also the main move, but it's not a move I've seen for a while, but at least back in the days it used to be what the good guys went for. Bishop d6 is another move which is also very popular. A lot of theory here, a lot of complications. And also this move h6 has certainly seen the light of day in the recent years. I believe this line here in particular is quite sharp with knight takes b5, e takes f6. Just a quick mention of that. A lot of theory here too. So. But should be 7. Castles, a6. Dubov wants to support this pawn, so he then can play c5 and open up for the bishop. c5 is the dream, but he's kind of struggling with his development. So Duda, he goes for it in the center. He has to do something sooner or later. This is all still theory. e4, c5, e5, and we are still in deep theory, I believe. I know that e5 is possible, but also d5 is what's called the Renals variation, that it used to be. Kasparov and stuff had a lot of games here back in the 90s and the good old days here with d5. Kramnik has too, I believe. But e5 is the other move. Knight d5. Knight g5, a very sharp line. Knight takes c3. If black plays bishop e7, which is logical, Duda wants to play queen h5, and a line can, for example, go g6, queen h6, and there's a lot of stuff happening with ideas of knight takes e6 and bishop takes g6, for example. I would say it's quite balanced still, but it's extremely complicated, where you definitely need to have done your homework. Dubov takes on c3, he takes c3, bishop e7, and knight takes c6. So here we see my idea that I just mentioned, that this is a very common theme. Black takes back, queen h5 check. And interestingly enough, Dubov, he plays g6 because he's afraid of king f8, f4, which looks extremely dangerous considering that white is just going to blast up black's king. And after something like king g8, f5, I would indeed as well, if I was black, would be very, very scared. But perhaps this was the better way to go, although practically it's certainly easier to play from the white side. Dubov played g6, and we have bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes g6. You may wonder why I didn't take the rook here, but he just notices that after knight f8, my king is safe, and I have 2 pieces for the rook, and you certainly do not have enough material. So queen takes g6 is the better move in order to keep the attack, and indeed you can also win back some material here with bishop h6, rook takes h6, queen takes h6, and we simply have a much better version of what we just saw, because black's king is still very vulnerable, while in the other line black's king was very safe. So king g8, queen g6 check, king h8, queen h6 check, king g8 takes the pawn with check, king g7, and now that we have checked, let's bring our rooks into the attack. So rook d1 is a very logical approach. We notice that the bar is going down. I did not quite like that move. I think it is the most natural move in the whole world. Knight f8 from Dubov, queen g4, king h8. At least Dubov has the knight in defense, also the bishop, and it's not so extremely easy, because if I play rook d3 in order to play rook h3, I can still simply play knight h7, and my knight here is working as a shield, and I do have 2 pieces and enough counterplay, certainly. So that's why Duda goes for d5, which I think is a really, really excellent move. And the point here is that if I decide now to grab the pawn, I can then play e6, and it's impossible to avoid queen h5 check, and the bishop is going to fall. So Duda played Dubov played knight h7. Very natural as well. Perhaps it was better to play queen d7 in order to ask Duda if he wants to trade queens. Certainly a difficult move to play. It looks extremely bizarre. So knight h7 is the logical approach from a human perspective, that's for sure. e6, it's also a very logical approach, but even that was a slight mistake, and it seems like the better way to go would have been to play rook e1 here, and now we are going to play d6 and e6 very quickly, and it's very, very hard to prevent. And the point is that if I take this pawn now, I have e6, and once again we have this trick with queen h5, and the bishop is going to fall. And if I play knight f6, I can simply play queen h4, and if you then try to escape with the king, I then get a few more checks, and my rooks will join the attack here. So this bishop is just going to fall. A very, very deep variation, which is it's not a surprise that Duda didn't really see that. So d6 is the logical move. Bishop h4, e6, just going with all the pawns. But after queen f6, e7, and bishop c6, it certainly isn't that easy to advance, right? This bishop here protects the square. This rook protects the square on e8. If I play d7, queen takes e7 comes, and I do have some great protection on the last rank, so it's not easy for Duda to advance. But he goes for g3, rook g8, queen h5, queen takes c3. Dubov doesn't care, he grabs yet another pawn, perhaps even threatening to take on g3 in a few lines. And after rook d5, which is a crazy move. And the point here is that he simply wants to block this diagonal. It looks pretty crazy. I have no words for that, so let's just see what happened here. Bishop takes d5, queen takes d5, and knight f6 it's a huge mistake. A huge mistake by Dubov, which might have cost him the game. The better move here is to take on e7 simply. You got to get rid of the pawn, and then probably put your rook behind the pawn. And after something like queen f7, due to the magnificent queen on f6, we can then play knight f6, protecting the rook. And there is no way here to break through as white. For example, rook d1, queen e5, and I will then take the pawn next, and it will probably end in a draw. or if then you play rook d8 protecting the pawn, I have a perpetual check with queen e1 and queen e4. A very deep line, and it would have been the better move because after queen f6, Duda has the brilliant strike, queen takes g8. And this is an excellent move, because if I take back with the king, I play d7, and one of my pawns will promote, and I will have a decisive advantage. So Dubov takes with the knight, e8 queen, bishop f6, queen h5 check, king g7, and it looks like the game is completely winning, but it's not over yet. Dubov is fighting, knight h6, d7, knight f7, queen g4, king f8, queen e6, c4, rook d5, b4. Dubov is running with his pawns, and these pieces here are very nicely protecting the square on d8. And although the bar is saying that it's completely winning, it's not so easy for Duda to break through. And Dubov is now starting to get a lot of counterplay here with his pawn on b3 and might even promote very soon. And queen takes a6, and look at the bar. Look at the bar. Dubov has now managed to acquire sufficient counterplay, and after b2, the position is completely drawn. The only move that would have kept a winning advantage would have been rook f4. And the point is that after b2, we can promote. It looks very crazy, but the knight is forced to leave, and then we have rook g4. This diagonal is open, so the king has to move. And after, for example, queen f5, the mate is simply inevitable. It would have been a very nice finish, but not surprisingly, he missed that. It's very difficult to find with little time. But b2, queen b6, and bishop d8. Rook takes, and queen takes d8. Are we now going to see 4 queens on the board? 4 queens, guys. Queen c6 check, f3, b1, and look at the bar. Look at the bar. This is a huge mistake, and it seems like the only way to draw the game would have been to play queen c2, then simply make a perpetual check here on the king. Would have been the way to save the game for Daniel Dubov, but no. He tosses in the towel with b1 queen, which is certainly quite logical. But although I do find it slightly strange that he missed the perpetual, I'm not sure what he didn't miss, what he didn't see. But usually in chess, when you have a check, you give it. But instead he went for b1, and after queen e8 check, king g7, queen e5 check. You do not want to queen directly here, because if he does that, queen c2 check and queen h7 is likely to end in a mate, or at the very least a perpetual. So checking first is quite good, especially on this square where this queen is controlling a lot of squares. King h7, queen h5 check, queen g4 check, queen f4 check, g4 check, and d8 queen. And we now have 4 queens on the board, and this queen is protecting the very important d2 square, and the game ends in a resignation from Dubov, and Jan Krzysztof Duda ends up winning. This was a huge moment for the Polish, who ended up winning the next game as well. I believe it was against Grishuk, and he managed to qualify, and it definitely did not look like that before this round. So a very impressive comeback by the Polish, who we will now be seeing in the quarterfinals. For those of you wondering, this is the bracket. So we'll have Magnus against Dubov, Lagrave against Levon, Wesley So against Duda, and Radjabov against Geary. So stay tuned for more, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.